here these aspects. So I'll introduce him when he's here. If he's here, I should be here around 6 or 6:15. That should take us into the break, and then I want to start a little bit with valuations. So with valuations, we're going to start with the very, very basic of valuing a owner-occupied home. So basically a home in which you live yourself. Just show you how it's done. I know that most of you are familiar with that concept, but I'll just go over that quickly. And then we'll move toward valuation of income-producing properties. We're not going to finish with that today. Depends on when we're done, or depends on how much we do today. I would also determine the date for the project that is due, because as of now we have, well, first of all, you have a project due 18th, okay? And then on the 18th, I'm going to give you the description for the next project, which according to the syllabus will be due 1-2 weeks later, on the 2nd. Okay? Now, depending on how much we're going to be accomplishing today, we either leave it at that time or we're going to move it a few days farther into the future because I may need you here for one more lecture to make sure that everybody is good. So it's going to be either due October 1st or 2nd or a few days later. But regardless, you're going to have a description of that project on August 18th. So, hello there. Nice seeing you again. Take a seat wherever you'd like. Okay. Any questions about what we did last time? No questions? Again, specific questions about the project I know some of you have. I'll be happy to either answer you over email or face-to-face if you have during the break, after class, before class, etc. I'll be happy to do it. If it's something new that we haven't touched, I can answer now. But if it's things that we've already touched, I'd rather do it not on everybody's time. All right. So, as we're finishing with mortgages, I want to make sure to show you what a price level adjusted mortgage looks like. So we discussed it a little bit last time. Remember price level adjusted mortgage? Yeah. Basically the mortgage where you pay the premium, you pay the real interest, and you are adjusting the mortgage to inflation. And I know I was kind of showing it with my hands how it first go up and then goes down, and maybe I'm not as good of an actor as I should be explaining with my hands, so I produced a graph for you. Probably going to be showing you better. I think it's under meeting 3. Yes, under meeting 3. Hey guys. If you look at the plum example, and you open it, basically this is what it looks like. So remember, in this case I assume that, okay, you're borrowing $250,000. I assume that the premium and the real interest is 4%. That should actually be R plus B. And then inflation is some other amount to which you're not being charged in the payment, you're just adjusting your payment. Sorry, you're just adjusting the mortgage to that rate of inflation. And because I want to make sure that we don't, just to keep it simple, I did 20 years and I did one row for each year rather than one row for each month, just kind of to show you how it's done. And basically, like I showed before, basically the principal is going up in the beginning and then eventually is going down as your balance should be paid within a shorter and shorter period of time. So this is the graph. You can look at that. You can look at the math here. But basically, every period, your payment is going up. In the beginning, the balance is being paid and then adjusted for inflation. So you start from 250, you pay 241, and then it's being adjusted up by inflation. Then you start with that balance. You pay down to 279 and then adjusted for inflation, and so on and so forth. And every time you have a payment, that payment is based on, of course, the amount that you owe. It's based, of course, on the R and P. It's based on, and it's based on the number of periods that are left. Okay, so as you move forward, you have less and less periods that are left, so that's why your payment is going higher. But remember, that is in a very high inflation environment. In a high inflation environment, you should be able to sustain higher payment. And by the way, this is the payment per year, not per month, because I did it on an annual basis.
So is the R plus P, the R is the real rate of return and the P is the premium? Okay, and then the F is the
inflation. Okay? Any questions? And then you'll see, basically, if you have F that is lower, you know, it becomes less steep, and you don't get to a much higher point than initially. But if F is very high, like 70%, then you basically climb very, very quickly to very high numbers. Well, again, if you have inflation of 70% a year for 20 years in a row, you know, that's what happened. But this is basically the dynamic behind it. So anyway, something for you just to look at. It's nothing that we're experiencing right now in the United States. We have inflation of below 2% right now. We're targeting 2.5%. But in many other countries, it is definitely a real story. And it can be here a few years from now. Who knows? Okay. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is when we're still talking about the fixed rate mortgages. And again, I apologize. I know this is not the most fun part of this course, but we still need to cover them. In the fixed rate mortgages, basically, when you're going to receive your mortgage, you are usually being quoted two different rates. And there's something that's called the APR, the annual percentage rate, which according to the truth in lending, every lender is supposed to provide you, or must provide you with the APR rate, which is different than the rate of interest. Now, the way it works is the following. If you're being offered a rate of 4%, but somebody else offered you a rate of 3.75%, how do you compare the two if one of them has higher initiation fee or origination fee, if one of them has more points, if one of them has, those are the two main ones, basically points and initiation fees, and it can be other things that also rolled into the rate. And people have difficulties comparing the two, right? Because they're basically not apples to apples. For example, the one with 375 also have a 1.5 and have slightly higher initiation fee, but the one with 4 does not have any points and does not have initiation fees, or have lower initiation fees. So which one would you rather choose? The 3.5 with more cost in the beginning, or the 4 with less cost in the beginning? Well, we don't know unless the government basically went to, try to initiate something that tell the lenders, well, you have to basically pull all those costs into the loan and calculate a rate that reflects those costs. So basically, if I'm offering somebody 375, but I'm also offering with that basically a cost of 1.5 points or some cost for origination fee, I have to take those costs and roll them into the rate, calculate what it will be the effect, and then say, well, after we factor those things in, your rate is not 375, it's 4.11. Okay? And then I can take this 4.11, I can compare it to the other one, and the other one that offer me a rate of 4%, but they have very low costs, they add them in, and let's say their cost is 4.08. Now I can compare 4.11 to 4.08, and I can make a decision. Okay, so you do not need to know, supposedly, you do not need to know much finance, you don't need to know how to account for those points, you just need to compare the numbers, and supposedly, the one that is lower is better. Now I'm saying supposedly because it's not that simple. If it was that simple, I wouldn't spend time on that. There's a problem with that. Anybody know what is the problem with the APR? Anybody care what is the problem with APR? You should care, because probably your clients are asking you, what does that mean, and which should I choose, and things like that.
It differs from broker to broker, doesn't it?
They all have to follow the same
The
procedure.
effective rate.
It's basically, yes, the effective rate. They all have to follow the same procedure from the government. They have to include the exact same thing. They have to follow the exact same calculations. We're not going to go over the calculation. If you want to read the Truth in Lending document, I can send it to you. It's about 100 pages. Enjoy, okay? That's not the purpose of that. I just want to touch what it really means. So they all have to follow the same procedure to get to some number. It still has problems. The first problem it has is that it doesn't include mortgage insurance. And the reason it doesn't include mortgage insurance, it's because mortgage insurance is charged by a third party, basically an insurance company that provides this cost, and therefore because the lender does not charge that and does not receive the money, it's go to a third party person, they don't include it in the cost. See if I have a question here. In the project, you use the interest rate, yes, because you're accounting for the initiation cost and all that separately. Yes, good question. Okay, so that's one problem. Anybody know what is the other problem? It doesn't include things like prepayment penalty. Okay, now I know with residential owner-occupied real estate, it doesn't really matter because we don't really have prepayment penalty on owner-occupied, but for many other loans, you know, if you're taking loans in commercial real estate, you may have a pretty substantial prepayment penalty. Remember, prepayment penalty is a way of the lender to basically guard himself, protect himself against the possibility that he will refinance when interest rates going down. They say, well, you can do that, but you have to pay us a certain amount, which is pretty substantial. It doesn't include it. Why do you think they don't include it? Why do you think, I'm sorry?
They want to make money.
Well, yeah, we all want to make money, but why don't, I mean, there's some things that they have to include. This one, they don't include it and don't have to include. Why do you think the government tell them you don't have to include?
Because it's an option.
It doesn't necessarily.
Because it may not happen,
Right.
right? It may not happen. So basically, and even if it happens, they don't know when it will happen. Are you going to prepare after 1 year? Are you prepare after 5 years? Are you prepare after 10 years? They don't know. So there's no really way for them to include it in the cost, except that two different lenders, maybe the APR will be on one 408 and the one 412, but the one with 412 actually have a much lower prepayment penalty. Well, that's better. You may be willing to pay a little bit more in terms of APR, but have the option to prepay with a much lower penalty. So that's something that you want to consider. So if you do have a prepayment penalty, APR can be very misleading. And the last thing, doesn't consider prepayment. I'm not talking about prepayment penalty, I'm talking about prepayment. What do I mean by that? Well, first of all, let's think about it. Let's talk about mortgages that me and you take for 15 years, for 30 years. Most people take a 30-year mortgage. That is the most common mortgage out there. If you talk about home-occupied homes, most people take 30-year mortgage. Now, how many of those that take 30-year mortgage do you think actually paying the mortgage slowly over 30 years?
Less than 40%.
Almost nobody. Almost nobody. Very, very few people. Because in order to do that, you need to stay in the same house for 30 years and every year only to pay the very minimum amount. Most people do not stay in the same house for 30 years, right? At least not in our generation. It was maybe a little bit more common 2 generations ago. People were staying in the house for longer, but even then, 30 years was pretty unlikely. Today, just so you get an idea, the average tenure in a house average in the United States, people stay in the same house for about 7.5 years on average. It used to be about 10 years in the 1980s, and since then it's been decreasing for a few reasons. One of them is basically the fact that the economy is moving a lot faster. People have more opportunities to work and accept jobs in other places, and therefore they're moving more frequently. So on average, people stay in the house for 7.5 years, and almost nobody stay in the house for 30 years. Now, if they don't stay in the house for 30 years, it means that at some point, let's say they took a 30-year mortgage, they stay in the house for 10 years, and then they sell it. When they sell, they pay off the mortgage. I mean, they prepay. Whatever left in the mortgage, when they sell, they pay the bank. The problem with that is that when you calculate those initial costs, okay, when they take, let's say, the 1.5 points in some initiation costs, okay, origination costs, they take all these costs and they roll it into the mortgage to get to the APR without getting into math, but they take that into, roll into the mortgage to get the APR, they spread it over 30 years because your mortgage is a 30-year mortgage. Okay, so think about it. They take whatever cost you have, they spread it over 30 years, and then you end up getting off the mortgage after 10 years. Well, that means that the same cost that was supposed to be spread over 30 years and maybe increase your rate by 0.25% every year, now it's only spread over 10 years, so it's increased the cost of your mortgage by more than 0.25%, maybe 0.5%. You seem confused. Let's say that I'm telling you that there is this event, and the event charges $5 an hour. Okay, that is the rate. Now, doors are open. It's a night event. It's a big party, okay? 10 p.m. Let's make it 8 p.m. till 8 a.m. People party all through the night, okay? 12 hours. And there is also some cost to get in. Okay, so you pay 5 hours for every hour you stay, and interest cost, let's say it is 12, let's call it $60. Okay, so you enter, you pay $60. Think about it as the points you pay in the beginning or the origination cost. And then after you in, you pay just the rate, the interest rate, of $5 an hour. Now, if those people would have to comply by the government for APR, here's what they're going to tell you. Well, the rate is $5 per hour, okay, or whatever percent per hour. But because we need to adjust for the initial cost, we're going to say the following. It's going to cost us 60 plus 12, because it's 12 hours, times 5, which is another 60. That is 120. And we're going to divide it by 12 hours because the event is available for 12 hours. So the rate is $10 an hour. And they're not lying. Basically, if you're getting in and you're staying all through the event, you're basically paying $10 an hour. Except with mortgages that nobody stay in the same house for 30 years, probably nobody's gonna get there at 8 a.m. Right?
Yeah.
You know,
8 p.m.
8 p.m. and staying until 8 a.m. So if you're the kind of person that arrive at 10 and leave at 1, so you're really there for 3 hours, what is your real cost? Okay, 3 hours, you pay 60 to get in. You got another 15 for each one of those hours, 5, that's make it 75. And you're there for 3 hours, that means the cost is really $25 an hour. It is not 10. So what I'm trying to say is that this APR is widely, depends on how long you stay in the house, can be widely misleading and basically understate what is, have a seat please. Widely understated and basically mislead people to believe that they are paying lower rate than they really do. So it's not because they're hiding something, it's not because they're lying to you about what's happening, it's because they're complying in a certain way. And if you choose to prepay, then you end up paying basically a lot more than you thought you would pay. And because this example is not, I guess, a mortgage sophisticated example, I put here the half truth in lending spreadsheet because they're really only telling you half the truth. And I just showed you some numbers. Hopefully it will make a little bit more sense. So let's say that you have the original situation where, for simplicity, you're borrowing $100,000 at an interest of 6%, and it's for 10 years. And again, I have a very short amortization table every year in one line just to make sure we can see everything in one shot, so I don't have to scroll. So it's $100,000 at 6%. You're going to pay per year. Your payment's going to be $13,587. Okay, but the idea is that behind this mortgage, the lender is telling you, well, yeah, your rate is 6% or whatever it is, right? Your rate is 6%, but we're also charging you 2 points. Okay, 2 points meaning 2%, which means that either you paid him $2,000 at the beginning, or you're borrowing 100, but really only receiving 98. It's the same thing. Either you paid him 2,000 or they give you 2,000 less. Eric, this is our guess if you wanna validate his parking. He's sitting in the back there. So you want to make sure that you also account for those $2,000. And basically, if you're really receiving $98,000, but they charge you the same payment as if you receive $100,000, because really you borrowed $100,000, except they only give you 98. If you calculate the rate on that to go all the way from 98,000 to 0 with the same payment that you'd pay on a $100,000 mortgage, your rate is 643. Okay, again, you don't need to really follow the math very closely, but the idea is that because they include those $2,000, spread them over 10 years, really the APR here would be 643. So say, okay, the rate is 6, the APR is 643. That is what we have to disclose. Here's the problem. Originally, if you were to hold the house, let's say for 3 years, and then move out, so you pay the loan, you'd have a remaining balance of $75,000, $75,847. If you want to end up with the same balance, starting from $98,000, which is really what you receive, ending with the same balance, again, you prepay, so you want to end up with the same balance, with the same payment as we talked originally. If you then solve for the interest rate, you would see that actually you paid 6.82% in this case. So again, the rate is 6, the APR will be 6.4, but the rate that you'd actually pay if you prepay, and most people do prepay, is higher. And there's no way for you to know what it's going to be until you know when you're going to prepay. Now, if you don't prepay it, if you stay in the house for 10 years and basically pay the mortgage very slowly until then you're right, your rate is going to be 6.43%. But if you prepay, like most of us do, the rate is higher. So that is basically the problem with the APR. Okay? Without getting too technical, but hopefully getting the point across.
Does the interest get higher the sooner you pay?
What do you think?
Fixed rate.
Yes. Just like if you pay in that example, if you pay in the advance $60 and then you got a call from your friend that a minute later and say, I really need you to come home for whatever. So basically you stay there for a minute, or you stay there for a minute, you basically paid $60 for almost no time. So if you're going to be paying this mortgage the next day because you bought the house, you thought everything is great, and the next day something happened, you just have to sell and you prepay the mortgage, well, basically think about it. You pay 2% for 1 day, right? 2% because it's $2,000 on $100,000.
Where's the 2%?
We assume here 2 points. Assume here 2 points. That's why you only receive 98 rather than 100,000. Okay? So if you were paying 2% and you stayed in the house for 1 day, just to exaggerate, think about what is the annual rate. You take 2% and then you analyze it over 365 days, it's astronomical amount on an annual term.
What are you paid at the end of the year?
then it's going to be 2% plus your rate, roughly. So it will be 6% is your rate, 2% for 1 year that you basically pay a penalty, so your rate is going to be like 8%. Okay, so it's going to be much higher than that. So, okay, and of course it's affected more the more you have those early payments. So if you have high points or high origination costs, the difference between APR that is stated to you and the difference between what you're actually paying is higher. If you have no points, if you have no origination costs, then prepayment does not affect APR. APR is what you're going to pay. Yes?
Just to be clear, the 2 points are a down payment on the
They can charge it in two different ways. No, it's not a down payment. It's basically a charge that the mortgage lender is charging you in order to give you a loan. Okay, remember we talked about discount points? So basically the mortgage lender will say, you know what, we're going to give you 6%, but only if you pay us 2 points. I mean, today the rates are lower, but let's say those numbers. Only if you pay us 2 points, and those 2 points you either pay by taking 2% from your pocket, in this case $2,000, and you pay them, and then they give you $100,000, and you borrow it for however long, and then say, you know, why do you give us $2,000 and we'll give you $100,000? How about we're just going to give you 98 rather than, right? So they just give you 98, which is that example that I'm showing here, which that is how it affects your interest rate.
But I thought the discount points added like a percentage to your rate.
They increase your rate, right? You're paying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like 2 points would be like a 0.25%.
Well, in this case, we're assuming that the interest rate they offer you is 6% with 2 points.
Oh, okay.
Now, it's true that if you don't want to pay points at all, the rate may be 6 1/4.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, but in this case, it's 6% and 2 points, and then I'm kind of working through the math.
Okay, gotcha.
Okay?
The
Yeah.
points is paid up front.
Yes.
Yeah. So really
Okay?
discount.
Just like the entrance in that event we talked about.
Would that be considered an origination fee then, or part of the origination fee?
That's part of the origination fee. They would call it like under a different line, but it's basically origination fee.
Okay, that's
Okay, origination fee usually would be for, you know, processing the paperwork, but they can do it for whatever. Yeah. When you pay, they can call it whatever they want. What you really care is how much you pay, right? All right, so let's stop here. We have Oren Cohen, who came here, was gracious enough to give us some of his time. And let me tell you a little bit about Oren Cohen. I'll let him talk about himself, but I'll tell you a little bit. Basically, remember we talked about creating value from nothing, and we spent some time on talking about long-term price appreciation, but if you're increasing the utility or the amenities in certain areas, that would make certain areas appreciate a lot faster than you would otherwise. And Owen Cohen was working very, very closely with Moshe Mana, basically his right-hand person. If any of you is following Miami real estate, you know who Moshe Mana is. And he was basically his right hand doing a lot of the original acquisitions and development, redevelopment in Wynwood. And I just thought it's appropriate, since we have an introductory class to talk about this topic, to have him tell you a few stories. No numbers, right? No numbers? No numbers, just some stories to give you a feel for what happened here in the last few years. And somebody who's on the, I guess, on the pavement doing the work. And hopefully you will enjoy it. He will tell you whatever he has to say. You can ask some questions, and we break around 7 or so, maybe a little earlier. Depends on how long it will take for dinner. Thank you. You'll need this, not because they can't hear you, because there are people that watch you from online. Okay, so we may want to put it
Are you excited?
Hi everybody, my name is Oren Cohen, and up to about 4 or 5 months ago I was the EVP of operations for Mana Wynwood. I have an extensive real estate background, mainly in commercial leasing. I used to be a commercial leasing agent in New York, I moved here right after 9/11 to Miami, and I've done a lot of small projects on my own, rehabbing some hotels on Hollywood Beach, some F&B projects that I've done, and then after the last sort of crash that we had around 2008, I actually owned properties in the design district, and I unfortunately took a hit from the market. And that sort of led me at some point after managing some projects to land the job with Mr. Mana, who I knew back in the days from New York City. I actually 90-something found him his first penthouse, and that's how we became friends and always parted. But I'm just going to give you a little bit of background about Wynwood. Everybody was talking about Wynwood and all the hype and all the big money that is coming to Wynwood. But when I got to Wynwood in 2011, it was really a wild, wild west. And thanks to Tony Goldman, who got in there, I think, around 2005 and had this whole vision of this artist village and creating a whole new culture, actually, who then translates into the real estate. He was really the one who had the vision for Wynwood. But what happened is, due to the market conditions, as you know, since 2005 to 2008, since all the crash and everything, when we got to Wynwood, the Goldman, there was the Wynwood Walls, which was the center of Wynwood and Joy's, one restaurant in the whole neighborhood. And the situation was pretty rough in there. We used to have, on an average, 3 holdups a day. It was horrible. I had tenants who would come in the morning, and I'm talking about the ones that were already like the new generation. So we were trying to get some kind of, technology type internet companies that wants to be in a warehouse in that cool vibe. Their employee would come in the morning and get robbed at the gunpoint at 9:30. Would clean up all the desks. There would be a getaway car, okay, and that we had to fight it day in, day out. At that point in period, that's when kind of what I would say around late 2010 is when Mr. Mana got there, and the initial thought that he had is that he was introduced to this large property, which was a failing project, about 150,000 square foot building that was never really completed. It had all the bones and the meats and bones, but it was really stripped apart. That was sitting on a 5-acre site. It was meant to be a free trade zone, and it was a private-public partnership between the city of Miami and a private developer. And it's, funny but not funny that, everything disappeared from the city as far as all the plans and the permits. It's like it's never happened. It was a ghost. It was a homeless colony. And when he came and saw the property, because he's really in the document and storage business, that's his bread and butter business, the idea was to take this facility and turn it into a document storage facility to the Miami area. But he is a visionary. And in Jersey City, he walked into a similar situation about probably 7-8 years prior to that. And he bought a tremendous amount of warehouses, turn of the century factories. They were rundown factories. And turned it into a huge art center. And that's really Mana Contemporary. That's about 1.5 million square feet of art center that has probably, I would say, probably most of the important artists in the New York tri-state areas are there, and they have international programs as well. But what happened is he gave home to artists that could not afford the Soho, Tribeca, Williamsburg rents, and now they're basically 10 minutes outside the Hollandtown. They built this incredible project. So there was a shift, and he had a vision, and his vision for real estate, which, for me as a small guy was a great opportunity to learn, is that when you look at a real estate play, especially a commercial, you got to come under the notion that it's a 10-year play. Okay, you obviously want to make everything that you can to turn a property to produce and to have great ROIs, But the basic game plan is a 10-year play. Now, it doesn't mean that you have to tie yourself into that. But if you go psychologically with this holistic approach into a neighborhood like that you see that the geography meets, the commercialization, and you don't come in and say, oh, you know what, this has to, you gotta have the vision, the 10 years vision, and of course not everybody can afford it, but this is just something good to inhale as a holistic approach when you look at properties, because what I see right now, especially when I'm out there, after 4.5 years, running 5 departments, and now on my own, I'm working on developments and on assemblage and things that I've done day to day for Mana, and I'm now doing with other groups independently. Then I'm definitely looking from this perspective of the 10-year play, okay? Because the value for a developer, the way that the developer creates a value before he even gets to the point of what am I going to build there and how many units I'm going to have and what's going to be my exit strategy and how many condominiums and all that good stuff, is how do I get a piece of land in a place that I know that will be viable within 10 years, or how do I know this area is going from here to 10 years? And something really that happens with a lot of people that come out of town, they come in and they have sort of a better vision than us because they look at the city and they see, oh, you know what, Wynwood is only 3 minutes from Miami Beach if you really ride over there, or Little River, it's really a few minutes to the other side of the river. When we drive through these neighborhoods and we live here for years, we don't tend to bet on the growth of these areas. I mean, now we're learning more and more and more, but basically somebody that comes out from an area like New York, they have a bigger vision. But what they do not understand is that we progress slower. We have less of a density. And our city and our administrative and our zoning and our permits, everything here is on a much slower scale. So they come a lot of air, and then you just try to do projects, and then you realize, okay, I got to go through permitting with the city of Miami. I really, you have no idea what's going to hit you if you don't know what you're doing down there, okay? But then still, things are still getting done here. How do they get done? It's because the people really know how to work with that system. I'm kind of jumping from one place to another, so if I stop me, I don't do this for a living, so please. But coming back to the Wynwood situation, so we have this neighborhood and there's robberies all over the place. They steal the copper from the air conditioning. You put an air conditioner on a building for a tenant, okay? You come the next morning with cages, with locks, with whatever, barbed wire, whatever the hell, it's gone, okay? And it's like it doesn't stop. And we are all like, oh, you got to come in here. It's the coolest places in the world, and there's still like some wholesale places that sell, the clothing on Fifth Avenue, and then you have it was just unbelievable what we were going through. But at some point, and this I have to say, it really I take pride in a sense that I was in a position to see people coming together. And that's what really brought Wynwood out of the, excuse my language, the hole, if you want to say. Because when we walked in there, Tony Goldman was dumping toxic assets. He had buildings that had roof collapse that, were up on the board for renovation and so forth. But because the market was so tough, he was, alleviating pressure, and we're selling them. And we bought some of these properties from him, especially on the northwest side, closer to the 95 on Fifth Avenue, And that's when we realized, when Moish realized, okay, this is an assembly. I'm not going to do the document. We're just going to go and try to assemble as many properties as we can. Hopefully, preparing it for a master plan so that, you guys, I'm sure, followed the newspaper and saw that the plan just got approved. But something like that doesn't happen overnight. This is a 4 or 5 year work. And it starts with trying to buy and assemble all these properties together. So, and that was kind of my job, working with the brokers, working with the owners. I was overseeing that. I was overseeing some construction. I was overseeing security. I was overseeing even finance at the time, working with the bankers, tried to refi, and back then it was almost impossible because it was really kind of, they used to call them wasteland. You know, the people would go to defecate over there, throw garbage, furniture, everything. It was just one big dump. And so it was, so when I walked into this job, and by the way, since we had that big warehouse that was abandoned for so many years and was a homeless community, we needed an enormous amount of money to fix it. One thing led to the next. I was able to get a hold of some of my friends from the movie and production industry, because back then there was funding resources from Tallahassee that were promoting the movies and TV shows. And you know, I had a connection into that world. I was doing some work in that area for a while. So then the Scouts, I was pulling it from other places, and we got the TV show Charlie Angels. And they came in there and they set up shop in a half broken down building. But that was, for me, a major jump start, because finally we had action. And I was also using, because when a production like that comes in and they need to build a studio, I was using their budgets to fix the studio, to fix the building. Which was, you know, it was great. You know, I was very lucky because that gave me money to put a sprinkler system. There was no metal. Everything was stripped in the building, you know. Even when we dug up the piping for drainage and so everything, they were never laid down. The contractors basically scammed, and a lot of things that were supposed to be in there infrastructure-wise were never there. So we were putting this place piece by piece. But I have to say, really, that the turning point for Wynwood, you know, at that point, even when I had a lot of friends from New York and, you know, investors that they would come into the neighborhood, they were really, really turned off. And this was really the time to buy, guys. We're talking about a price of $25 per square foot, $30 per square foot. I mean, we're only talking 4 or 5 years ago, where now you're looking at $1,500 a square foot on 2nd Avenue, okay? Because now you have hedge funds that are coming, so it's no longer us, the Miamians, trying to do business. Now there's big players over there, right? But when you look at it this way, you say, oh my God, it was 25, it was 30, how come I didn't buy? I mean, when you look at it today, you know, you probably call 5 friends and get a couple $100,000 and buy 5,000 square foot, it'd be worth $5 million today, right? So this is really where you have somebody who has a vision. I mean, you obviously have the means to support the waiting game, or find alternative use to bring income in the meantime, you know, and place temporary things that happen, whether it's the market that we did on the weekends, and with the food trucks, you know, there was all kind of other things we're trying to do, because we couldn't really sign leases with tenants, but we were trying to activate and bring some income in. And I was working with very limited budget, so whatever I was bringing, I was putting back in the properties back then. And understanding today that the reason why Mr. Mana didn't really put any money in the property is because he was working on a master plan. There was no reason to build now a 5-story or a 6-story building when you need to think about a master plan and something that big, you know, that large. Where are you going to place what? But going back to the work on the ground, what was really nice about Wynwood that I like to share with you is that the process of how the neighborhood came together. Because at some point, we got the bid going on, which is the Business Improvement District, and that was a really interesting process to see how you form a group like that of people, and they really come together and they make a change. And you know, it's something that you don't see often in a big urban atmosphere. It's usually something where you see all the way on the main street, small towns of America, people come together, they care about their town, and they really actually do something. Well, you know what, here, it was just like that, and it was unbelievable. It was like people were fighting and battling every day together to make the neighborhood better. And it took about a couple of years, and it was really nice because we had, for instance, we created a budget. So obviously I was representing somebody who owns 40% of Wynwood almost. back then it was 30% or something like, which was still a huge amount of property consider the rest of the owners. But it didn't really matter how much space or what size building you owned, and it also had to do with the business owners as well. So it was all the gallery owners and everybody, and we would meet in Wynwood Walls, and Tony Goldman was alive still, and we really created this community of working together. And it was incredible to see the change because we set up a budget for security, we hired extra police, we forced the mayor to come and get involved. We got these ladies that were former convicts, and they were the cleaning ladies of Wynwood, and we used to make sure that they get paid every week. For us, it was like a big pride to help and bring people from the community, to create jobs. So there was just a spirit like that, Where comes Art Basel, and you see everybody is preparing his building for this great festival. It was less commercialized. It was more like a small village, like a small town, and it was really an incredible process to see. And to my opinion, that's what really created the huge value for Wynwood, because that really brought everybody together, and that's when people started to feel safer, that we stopped crime, that we were involved with the police, with fire, with the city, with the people, in every aspect of the neighborhood to bring it up from where it was. And now you see the results. You see that the price within 5-6 years went from $25-30 a foot to $1,500-1,700 a foot. So it's pretty incredible. Now I see that, but going through that process, and I'm just speaking personally because I'm out there right now. So you say, okay, but this is so big. I mean, this is so like out there. This is so like such a big play. This is And yes, I agree with you. Wynwood right now came to a point, and I say this also from hands-on experience because I work with commercial tenants. Just to give you for reference, the last deal that I made for Mana, I did for Amazon. I leased 45,000 square feet, and we did a fulfillment center. So I'm used to work with large commercial tenants. That's sort of my forte. But recently now, as I just made a deal. And I'm putting a children gaming center in Wynwood, okay, which is a local business. And I just want to tell you to what point it got and why. I'm just giving you just a bunch of information. Anyway, if I talk too much, just tell me.
What are you here for? You're here to talk.
So
you guys can ask questions.
You can ask questions. You can ask me, but I'm just So, but the market in Wynwood became so. Tough right now. Why? Because we have a local. This is a perfect example. Those of you who don't have kids probably don't know that, but there's a gaming center in North Miami that's called Ninja Lounge. It's one of those places where you have an obstacle course, and it's for kids to go and blow off steam. Okay, it's like a big indoor park. Okay, so this is really the concept, and this concept they want to make it a little cooler, more artsy. And the business owner wants to have a program for autistic kids and involved also kids with no means, have programs, whatever, but it's really also the heart of Wynwood. So it's geographically will probably cater to people who come from Miami Beach, from the Gables, so why am I telling you all this? It took me 9 months to find a business model as far as the rents in Wynwood to be able to place her, okay, in a building where it makes sense for her, in terms of operation. Because the price per square foot for leasing in Wynwood right now is touching the 40s. Okay, $40-45 a foot. Some of them are pushing 50, some of them are 60, some of them are $100 a foot on Northwest 2nd Avenue for retail. Okay? So if you have a local business here that relies on local traffic, and this is not a flex store for, H&M or whoever it is that they don't care about paying the rent. The model is really, really hard. They're not going to be able to survive, which is everybody now putting hundreds of stores over there, and I'm not being negative. I don't say that they're not going to fill up eventually, But I say when I work with clients and it's local clients and they need to be, their business needs to make sense. Otherwise they'll fall. Then it's kind of like a situation where it almost exceeds the height. Or it's only the game for the big companies right now. So what can we do, right? So now it's a different play. But I'm just going to give you my 2 cents. If you ever into your own investments, if you ever into do a small assembly, if you ever, if this is your direction, okay, where you're going to come in and create your own projects or do your own projects, right? You got to go and look to see where are the youngsters going. Where are all these artists that were kicked out of Wynwood because they are the one who created all of Wynwood and we don't have them there anymore. Okay? Some of them went to Hialeah, some of them went to Little River, some of them went to wherever, okay? But and this is a typical process where the artists come in, they create the vibe, then comes the big developer, cleans it up, and that's it. And it's sort of like where do you find the balance? Well, for us, because we are the local guys and we are the ones who are in this town, the way that I see where the market is going, I mean, and I'm following this is like, where is the need? Okay, where is the market, and where can I go for that is reasonable? So everybody ran to Alapata, but Alapata is huge, And what am I going to do in Alapata? Are you going to buy? So if you're going to go look at an investment property, see if you can assemble something. See if you have a potential when you buy a house, there's a possibility to buy the one next door and the one behind it, even if you can't do it right now, okay? Have it in your game plan for 5-10 years down the road. Because the formula these days for the investors, and I get that also from a lot of overseas investors, like, listen, we'll buy something that throws something around the 5%, 6% return, right? But we want to make sure that it's got an upside for a development, that this is also a development site. So within the next cycle comes up, I can erect a building. And then I don't mind to park my money for that period of time. So they will also help you. This method of psychology of thinking will also help you raise money for your small investments if you decide to go in that direction. And a very good homework to do is just go and look at the zoning in that area. Try to learn and study the zoning. What's the upside? Is it going to go there? What's the city? The city have plans. I mean, the city is even talking about turning Northwest 7th Avenue 441 into a major route, okay? And you got to look at our city. Where is the city going within the next 5 years? Because we are growing. We're becoming finally a city. But just a few words, Go ahead, son.
I have 2 questions. One, how did you get to see Miami cooperate with you in terms of Wynwood? And the second one is, where are your thoughts on the
Well, so what we did with Wynwood, because I'm going to tell you, this is a real story. So I'm sure you know Joey's restaurant. It's right on 2nd Avenue. It's the first Italian restaurant over there. Okay, so now it's a normal business day. I think it's a Tuesday at lunchtime. All right, and this is the only, like 2, 3, you have this and Panther Coffee. So you either go get coffee or you go get pasta or pizza. Okay, and so we are the people who are working in Wynwood. And they get robbed with a shotgun at 12:30 at noon. Okay, high noon time. And then, like we had it, that's it. All it takes right now, and the thing is that the officers that worked in the neighborhood, they were trying to quiet it down so it doesn't leak to the press. And we were all kind of cooperating because, listen, if this goes out, and everybody talks about cool Wynwood in, France and Italy and Paris and Milan and whatever, and they found people are getting robbed here, we're done. We're done with our investments. So after that happened, we called a special meeting with the mayor. And then he came with the chief of police and everything, and we did a meeting in one of the neighbors' yards. And we told him, listen, you're only going to take 1 bullet for this entire, neighborhood to die. So we really held them against the wall in that meeting, and what they did is they created a task force. We hired extra 2 officers. We put a fund together that patrolled the streets, and what they did, they finally put an undercover unit They actually went in and started to clean Wynwood, and that was the turning point, really. But we got the mayor to come and the chief of police to come and sit with us. But it was an effort, because you know what? When you get a lot of people, they listen. But one time the politician listens. You get 100 people in a room, believe me, they're gonna show up and listen. And so that was the turning point. I'm sorry, what was the second question?
Little Havana.
I think Little Havana is great. I think you know, when I drive through the neighborhoods and you look at old houses, and maybe Little Havana, it's starting to get expensive, right? In some sense, when you try to go and buy those little houses. But now, take a step back. Look, we're a city that has tremendous amount of resources. We have the beach, we have the weather, we are the capital of South America, right? So I lived in New York for many years, and the one thing that I remember very well is that I was managing I was managing a project at some point where I was rehabbing 5 townhomes, which were like townhouses and duplexes, very expensive on 61st between Lexington Park. And that was the first time that I was a young agent, real estate agent, when I walked in and saw what actually a fancy house looks in the city. Okay, because you always like live in an apartment with roommates, you share whatever, and you see how people really live in a house with an elevator, with 2-car garage that goes on a lift, on a 5-story house, privately owned, in the heart of the city, right off Park Avenue. So, what I'm saying is, if you look 10 years from now, okay, and you have, this is going to be the core of the city between Brickell and downtown, having a house that costs now $300,000 in 10 years from now, it's probably going to be $1.5 million or $2 million, any way you look at it, because you will have a house in the city, 3 minutes from work, you know? So I definitely today, more and more and more, and when I go around, you can already sense it. You know, in 10 years from now, you won't be able to touch this. In 10 years, 10 years from now, you won't be able to touch this. Even if we go into some kind of a slowdown, even if there is some sort of a correction in the economy with this election, that there is no certainty. There is just too many good things for Miami that are going on. Look, it's really safe here, you know, as far as all the, you know, terror, political, whatever. It's really centrally located. It's still the United States. It's the safest place for all of the Latin America to bring money here. They all want to have, you know, and now we're opening up the airlines to China. I mean, this just, people discovered Miami. And that brings me back to something else. If you go into any city around the world that sits on a waterfront, you know, and I'll tell you, because no, I'm talking about Nice, Cannes, Tel Aviv, $3,000 a foot for condo. So we are still, if you look at it, we're still reasonable. Yes, we built too many condos again, because that's, you know, what we do. But if you look at it and compare to other places around the world, it is still reasonable. It is still reasonable and safe. And it's modern, it's United States. So I don't think the growth is going to stop. I don't think that we, you know, maybe it'll be a slowdown. Maybe you have to look for a niche market. You know, there's something else that I just give you thinking out of the box a little bit. So about a couple of months ago, I was introduced to this doctor from Germany, and she's got to be somewhere in her 50s, I would say, and she's like PhD in this and PhD in that and PhD in that, you know, and I'm you know, really, really very intelligent woman, very smart, a doctor. She comes to me with a concept, and she says, listen, I have investors in Europe, and I have this concept that what I want to do is I want to do assisted living for the LBT community, okay? Because they don't have families. And so if you think about it right now, and then and I said, this is an incredible project, but do you have any, I have no experience in real estate, I don't have anything, whatever, but I have tremendous amount of contacts to funding, to resources, very, you know, especially from Europe, whatever. So I gave her some guideline, and I said, look, this is what you have to go to your investors with. You know, this is the process before we even identify properties. You know, you have to create your financial structure, you have to put all your eggs in a row, and then you come back, and we can see how we can help you to, purchase something, to develop something. I hear on the news the other day, in the morning, I think it's in Coral Springs, somebody had just done that. They got a small building, 24 units, okay, and they created a community. Now, from demographics, I said, look, we have 17,000 condos on the market that are very expensive, and we know that we don't have enough buyers, and we know that it's really unaffordable, and we know that the flow of investment stopped. Russia stopped, this country stopped, then they put the regulations on it. They want to know where the money is coming from, so it's coming to a halt. It's probably going to turn into rental. Everybody was talking about affordable rentals, right? Because we were looking at micro-living. This is the new way of life. But are you going to do a micro-living project right now, which is going to cost you, let's say, $100 million, while you have 17,000 apartments coming on the market for rent? Because you know what? If I'm coming out of college right now and I want to hit the clubs, I would love to live with 3 or 4 of my buddies in one of those luxury apartments. It's heaven, right? So there's an absorption rate of what the market can take here, too. So where am I going next? Who is my next tenant? Who's my next client? And that's really what I learned a lot from Mana, to think that way. I mean, I knew a little bit about it before, but it was just really a very nice experience to understand what is a wide, look at a wide perspective on something, and then bring it back from that macro, bring it back to your micro, to your life, to how are you going to approach investing or working on your deals. Go ahead.
It's like what you said, you have to have vision, and it does take about 10 years to really get into a neighborhood. Like, look what Swire Properties did. They assembled 12 acres, and they're building Brickell City Center, the biggest mall in all 3 counties. And now Miami World Center, about 20 acres, if I'm not mistaken.
Right.
It took them about 10 years to get all of that together, and it's going to change downtown Miami. So
Completely.
that's huge. And already Miami is just in so much growth. All the highways are expanding, the malls are expanding. We're the #1 in the country for freight flights, for international flights, and #2 for passengers, right after JFK. So it's just
and we didn't
so
even
much
get the
growth for
Chinese
growth.
yet,
Can you tell that she's a salesperson?
By any chance, have you seen the painting on West Dixie that Ira Rothstein made on the shopping center?
The what? I'm sorry?
It's a painting on the shopping center side. I guess he's trying to convert North Miami, kind of like the same idea of Linwood. Now that they changed
On what street? On what are you talking?
West Dixie Highway.
West Dixie, yeah, that's what I was saying. West Dixie 441. What I was just mentioning before is that, okay, what happened is all the artists were pushed out. But nobody defined the new neighborhood for them, which is really a shame, because it was a great opportunity for another Tony Goldman to come in and try to grab somewhere and put them in one place. So what people are trying to do now, they're moving to 7th Avenue, they're moving to Alapata, they're moving up to 7th in the 50s, but it's hard because it's too scattered and there's no community for them. So that you'll see those trials here and there, and you see that people are getting into that. And then there was another situation in the design district, The design district is another example where they brought all these amazing brands, okay? But all these local furniture stores that were there, that were serving Miami, had nowhere to go. So some of them moved to Little River, and some of them basically just disappeared. But it's interesting to see that, You can't touch the design district. It's worse than Wynwood, in terms of price per foot. Go ahead.
You said your forte is like big square feet for large industrial warehouses. Where do you see the future, like you said, in 10 years? Because the Panama Canal is expanding.
We have a big problem with it. I want to tell you that whoever goes into that business, on a large scale, thinking because it's all pushing to Medley,
Yeah.
which is really far.
Where do we go?
Very good question. Very good question. Because they're phasing out. There's a little bit in Hialeah, but that's too small and it's gonna die out soon. So I guess it's all gonna be west and north.
I don't know.
But there's definitely a big need.
Doesn't allow. I won't be able to do it.
Go ahead.
Yeah, is there a new demographic of investors for commercial projects, given the Latin American economy? Is it mainly U.S. hedge funds, or are other countries involved? China, like you were mentioning?
Well, there's different programs. I don't know if you guys know about the EB5. A lot of the China money came from EB5 for construction. That's one avenue. But no, I mean, I see different groups, believe it or not, coming from Peru, from Argentina, although some of the money is now, I hear, going back to Argentina, so there are still active groups. But yeah, I would say that the guys with the big checkbooks that are buying the prime are really the New York players.
I was going to ask something about design district you were mentioning. Taking into consideration that someone like Craig Robbins created the area, or those big players, I personally was trying to sell, the houses on the west of 2nd Avenue?
Mm-hmm.
They were 50,000 4 years ago, and now they raised up to 500,000. Some investors, small investors, they were trying to assemble and trying to change the zoning of 2nd Avenue. My question to myself was why someone like Craig Robbins or Moshe Mana or those big players will leave some room to small investors, and why they didn't bought all those houses in advance before.
First of all, thank God that they leave some room for us to work. No, I mean,
one block from.
I think, look, I moved to the design district from New York when I moved here, so I know that very well too. And I think that, by the way, the two common things that have design district and Wynwood is that there's really no residential. I mean, you're looking at Second West, where the houses are, and that's also something that is kind of, it's a little bit plastic, if you know what I mean. It's a little bit artificial in a sense that, and now we feel it, and now there's residential programs are coming in, or trying to come in, but if you think about it, the difference between, for instance, Wynwood and the design district is that Wynwood has a soul. The design district went on this whole high-end, bringing those big brands and fighting with Bell Harbor and whatever, and that's their game, and I hope it succeeds. But you definitely see less walking traffic in the design district, right, than you see in Wynwood. Because what we did in Wynwood, we embedded in the zoning that we want these kind of businesses that, make baked goods in the back and service the customer in the front. Exactly, Baker is the perfect example. We embedded it in the zoning when we created the master plan, and we sat with the zoning and with the city people. We put it in there as a fact that this type, we welcome this kind of businesses, that actually produce and sell. That they're a different version of the mom and pop. I mean, they're not mom and pop. They're today business, but they are for the community. So it becomes part of the community. And that's why every business owner, and now there's big companies coming in as well. But I'm saying before that, it was like every business owner that was there, and it was the coolest thing. I mean, I still do a lot of them, and I still go get my coffee here and there, and it's still the same, atmosphere somewhat until the big brands are coming. But go ahead.
In the early stages of development for Wynwood, I know a lot of private investors injected a lot of capital for development, but did you see traditional financing, like commercial banks, come in and see the vision?
I think I was one of the first ones to bring a commercial bank over there. And I remember I had a lot of leverage because the company I was working with had a lot of assets also up north. But I'll tell you, for instance, since it's passed already, I can talk about. So I was trying to go get a traditional loan, a commercial loan, on empty property there that was basically a swamp, okay? And the bankers were friends of mine. It's a local bank here that does, that does business, and I have to sell it as our company does shipment and delivery and storage and this and that. So one of our lots, we designated it as a container shipment port. It's supposed to send containers to other parts of the country. We never even had one container over there.
It was undeveloped as of that time. The plan, it was undeveloped at that point.
Yeah, I mean, they went with it, and that was the first loan that I assembled a few of the properties, and I got the first loan for $6.5 million. But back then, they were very, very cautious. They wanted a lot of equity in the property. It was easier because a lot of it was refi. That's another thing, is that And that's another thing that Mr. Mana does on a larger scale, is that he creates his own markets, really. If that's another conversation, but just to understand how and why he operates the way he does, which is very interesting to see, is that there's a lot of successful developers and entrepreneurs in our city, you know. What he did, and he did it, by the way, on the Flagler Street as well. You know, we've got 39 properties around Flagler, right? What he did is he assembles enough, and while it goes and appreciates in value, he keeps refinancing and buying more. Yeah, you know, I mean, you got to be able to be in a position to do that. But once he assembled enough land, he almost kind of created his own market. You know, so he did the same thing in downtown, and he tied a lot of the properties, and he paid the people interest until it was time to close. Now, if you put a property under a contract, and you close in a year or year and a half time from now, but you give the seller 5-6% return monthly, so he's happy, he knows he's going to close, he has time. A lot of them were mom and pop landlords that didn't know how to even receive this kind of money. They need time to plan, they need to think what I'm going to do, 1031, this and that, you know. It was the perfect situation. Because in a year and a half time, market went up. Now it was easily financed. So it's just strategy.
Do you see the same thing happening in Liberty City? So right now you see the zoning there is changing. You see property owners, the mom and pops going out and people starting to assemble over there. And as you talk with these property owners, everybody expect their property to sell, you know, in the million range when it's actually still worth, you know, probably about like probably 300 something.
Right. I think that you got to be very careful between what happened and what's not anymore. Because there is a slowdown right now. Let's be realistic. You know, I mean, this summer there have been some transactions, but it definitely slowed down. And it didn't slow down because people are not capitalized. Now, I'm talking to investors who did cash out, were sitting on tens and millions of dollars, and they're like, listen, we want to see what's going to happen with the election. If you find somebody that is bleeding, you know, we'll come in. But nobody's right now basically taking the pencil. You know, everybody's like, oh yeah, we want to sell, but we're not going to sell at 10% return. We will sell at 6%. You know, so based on the cap rate, the price is still high for them. So there is some sort of a slow, you know, there's a little bit of a slow. And so I know exactly what you're talking about because there was a piece of land that was a 5,000 square foot lot that I had from a family, and they were a very prominent family in Overtown. The father was a very famous professor or doctor, and the kids received this as a inheritance, right? And it was part of the assembly. It was just an empty lot, right? And I was trying to buy it to connect it to the assembly so we can have this, because it's literally just a little piece touching the road, and you know. And I entered into negotiation with them, and they read that he spent on a property in Flagler, you know, I don't know, $27 million. So they were asking for 5,000 square feet, something like 1.8 million or some, you know, crazy number. And I tried to explain to him, listen, this is a raw wasteland, and at the end of the day, he's going to build around you. Okay, you will never be able to sell it. You're not going to put a house on there, on that 5,000 square foot land. You know, this is your best interest rate. Take the money, roll it, put it somewhere else. But they had this notion that, oh, this big developer is coming, he's bullying everybody, okay? And we have a lot of money, we don't need that. And also, he bought on Flagler Street. I said, listen, he bought a building with an income on Flagler, okay? There are major tenants in that building. And how do you compare eggs and apples? You know? But it is what it is. So I see that, and I think there will come a reality where, you know, you'll realize, and you just got to sit on the sideline and wait, you know, target those and just stay in touch with them, you know. But also
or you have a question from people online. You want to read that?
Right.
They're wondering if you can speak about the process might be for attracting an industry or employer to an area that is underdeveloped, that does not have a problem like you described in Woodward. Possible doing a mid-sized scale development. basically how to attract people to an
Okay.
area that is
That is not
undeveloped,
developed.
but doesn't have problems of crime, I'm assuming, or
Right.
just underdeveloped.
So, thank you for the question. So I'm kind of working on a similar situation like that right now, by the way, in a certain neighborhood that I feel I'm trying to bid on a couple of pieces of properties that I want to assemble and actually create some kind of a complex for artists. So so the point really comes back to the monetization of the project in essence, because what can you use the property for? What is the use on the property is really the number one thing you can do from zoning laws. What are you allowed to do that? To do that, I'm sorry. And that really will dictate where can you go with. I mean, for instance, there was a law that was passed here in the city of Miami that's called an open lot permit. Open lot permit helps small landlords who have a vacant piece of land to activate the property on a temporary base, okay, and generate income so that they can make extra income and create something on the property. Now, it has to be by code. So, for instance, if you wanted to do a container park, right, that the city of Miami has a problem with, because you need engineering and you need to tie it down and it needs to be anchored, and then you need plumbing and you need electrical. You're almost the same price of building a real building, okay? But if you wanted to take a place and let's say open a market, an organic market on the weekend on that lot, and you brought generators and you submitted just a small floor plan to the city of Miami and you start to create some attraction over there, okay, then that's okay. No problem. You can rent it. You can rent it for this. You can rent it for an event. You can pull that open lot permit. You can use it as temporary parking lot, especially in Wynwoods when there's a shortage of parking. So you got to address the zoning. The zoning is number one. And then you have to see what is your demographic. What is the need of the market? Is it if you're somewhere next to a college and you were going to go and tell me that you want to open up a burger joint, with a huge outdoor place that everybody can dance after, great. If you have to know if you're allowed to do that. If you're allowed to do it, it's great. If you have to go to rezoning, forget about it, because from an investment perspective, the analysis is completely different with starting with areas that are a little more rural, that are less developed. And unless you target a tenant, a big tenant, that you can do a build to suit, whether it's a distribution center or whatever, or a big warehouse facility, that's a completely corporate and a big business to get into. Another thing, shopping plazas. Look at the demographics. Look at, the distance from one area to the next. Can you grab one anchor tenant? Can you get this piece of land that you have, and with not a lot of money, if it's zoned for it, put a big sign, get rendering, get an architect, okay, and say coming soon. Start collecting LOIs, letter of interest. When you have that, go shop for your money.
Guys, 2 last questions. We need to respect his time.
No problem.
We have the arts in Wynwood. Where do you see it going afterwards, the second phase to this?
Well, from what I gather is that the direction, well, the number one thing that we tried to actually wrap it into the zoning, but we were not successful, but at least everybody's trying to follow it, is that the designs of the building will keep an artistic flavor. That these buildings will not be like the same buildings that you see in Brickell and anywhere else in Miami. The second thing is that I worked very hard and I was not successful on is I try to embed something in the zoning that every new project would have to allocate certain percentage from the space for a working artist. And I wasn't successful. It's something that I'm really upset about because I thought it was a very good idea, for instance, to have in an office building one studio that is all glass that you see an artist working with, and to keep the spirit in the neighborhood. I do think it's a bit of a problem. Look, from the galleries, the perspective from Goldman, for instance, is that, look, before there were galleries, they were selling, less of an expensive art. So now we'll get the big guys to come in with the more expensive art. But again, it's the artist community that is sort of hard to keep. And I hope that Mana does it because they did it in Jersey City. Although the way that I see the trend going right now, you know, it's sort of a losing money proposition. You got to do it really at ground level when the property is cheap and you're able to give them the infrastructure. But, you know, hopefully other industries will take place, and there's great schools there, and there's other great businesses and companies that are moving in. But yeah, that's touching a little bit of a sore spot. I gotta say, I gotta be honest. Right.
He touched up on the Panama Canal. Based on my research, I mean, it's supposed to make a huge impact on Miami, over $27 billion annually, because there's huge ships that are coming in, the Panamax ships. Do you feel like that's gonna be like a factor that will really also help Miami? You better say yes.
Absolutely. I mean, we're just talking that we will have shortage of the warehousing service.
Because it's ships 3 times the size that used to go through and used to go to New York, and that's how New York, I think, grew to be the city it is today. They monopolized the transportation business.
No, absolutely. But that's what I'm saying, that our infrastructure is not even ready for that. There will be a need for warehousing, big
That's
warehousing.
why they did the tunnel, right? The $1 billion tunnel, and the dredging, 60 feet underwater.
Anyway, guys, it's been a pleasure.
All right, guys, thank you so much.
Really?
Yes.
Oh my God, thank you so much. I'm so honored. Thank you very, very much. Thank you.
All right, guys, let's take a break. We'll be here in about 40 minutes. 10, 40.
My research.